Hey guys, it's Keith with the L1 Automotive Training Channel, and welcome to this week's Tech Question Quickie video, where I answer your questions about tools, equipment, and anything automotive industry related. So, let's check it out. All right, let's get into it. So, don't forget, you can submit your questions to techquestions at l1training.com. I'll put a link down at the bottom and across the bottom of the screen, make it a little easier to find. So, let's check out my emails and see what we've got for this week. All right, our first question of this week is from Ronnie P. He says, Keith, I'm working as a mobile technician. I'm wanting to start doing ADAS, Advanced Driver Assist Systems, calibrations. I'm having a hard time figuring out the right scanner to get and what the best target kit to start with. Any advice would be appreciated. Thanks, Ron. I'll admit he did mention one particular brand of Autel. What I can say from my experience, I have an Autel ADAS kit, as well as quite a few scanners and one Autel tool specifically designated for ADAS calibrations. I will say that any of this, if you're planning on dedicating this one to just ADAS stuff, a couple things to keep in mind that I've kind of found throughout my journey of doing ADAS. For one, a lot of these calibrations also require a programming event. So if a front camera module is replaced, or if you're doing a lot of collision work, which is what the primary supplier of all the ADAS work out there in the industry is, you're dealing with a lot of replaced modules that also require programming or configuration ahead of time. So a lot of times factory scan tools are going to be required, or some kind of J2534 device and a factory subscription, at which point you're pretty close to just sticking with factory tools anyways. If you are looking for, like, if you're, now I know Ronnie's not a glass installer, but if he was a glass installer, a lot of those guys are specifically looking at getting these like an Autel system or an Opti-Aim or something that's geared towards one scanner that does all of it with that. The problem that you run into is that doesn't really work. You're going to do a lot of replacement of components, and a lot of programming has to be done before a calibration can be done. And then even when you have one of these tools that have it, I can tell you the instructions have been notoriously incorrect for the vehicle, especially if you're dealing with a lot of like 2020, 2019. And doing ADAS work, that's the majority of what you work on, would be new cars that would normally be under warranty, that they're in a collision, so they're getting repaired outside of a dealership environment. So it is good to get your feet wet by starting out with one of those, and I would say I'm torn both ways. Now doing it and having an idea of what tools and equipment I see often and what vehicles and what calibrations I do often, I would say from this point, for me, I've been buying OE targets and stuff, and I already have almost all the OE diagnostic tools and scan tools and subscriptions because we're doing module programming as well as a large part of our mobile business. So for me, I'm buying a lot of factory target stuff. But to get my feet wet, I did start with the Autel MA600 kit, which most vendors, it's going to run about $10,000. Actually, a little bit more if you don't have an Autel tool at all, or if you already have an Autel tool, you're still going to have to spend about $950 on the Autel update card, which turns that device into your Autel ADAS tool. And the reason why there's a cost associated with just adding that to your tool is because all the R&D involved for the instructions. So there's a lot of options out there. I do like the Autel stuff. My preferred scanner currently is the 919. It has all the same features as the Ultra, except for it's missing some of the repair videos that are built into it, and it doesn't do dual screen. It does. You can have multiple apps open, and it's smaller. But for me, that was perfect. It being smaller was a benefit to me. So I really like my MS919 for Autel scanners. The kit that I started with was the MA600, which is only lane departure watch. But by the time I had purchased that MA600 lane departure watch kit for all the front-facing camera stuff, I had already had most of the common radar targets, which were rather inexpensive, honestly. My setup for Honda was less than $400 between the radar cone, the stand, and the lane watch camera, or the lane watch camera target, which was kind of large and complex. So between those two, I did have about $750 in it. And then for Toyota, getting the cone and the stand was about $540, I think, for the pair of the radar. And between those were the most common things I was seeing, really, is the front and rear, or the front and radar and the blind spot radars for Toyotas and Hondas, and most of those take the reflector cone. And then the MA600 covered almost all of the front-facing windshield camera stuff. So that was my chosen starting. But what I would push for you is to just be careful, do your homework, make sure that you're trying to use all the targets that are non-resized. That's a big deal for me. So there are some of the Autel targets I do not use that came with the kit because they are resized. The next question comes from Dorsey T. Sorry if I butchered your first name. It says, hello, Keith. My question is, I want to learn how to reflash and reprogram vehicles. Would I be able to do this by becoming a member of your training class? I know it will be a different method of learning, but can it be done? So I do on my website, l1training.com, have a $20 a month membership that allows you access to all my training videos. And it's not just module reprogramming. We do diagnosis, network diagnosis, just overall process. We do some wiring stuff, some advanced level electrical, which I hate using advanced electrical because it's not really a thing. We're just trying to get a better foundational grasp. But yes, so you could learn the basics of starting with that. A lot of it is read the manual. And if you take the class or one of my classes in person that I teach throughout some of the events across the country, you'll find that a lot of mine it's a lot of reading. So yes, my online training course does a great job of getting you a good idea of what tools and equipment you'll need, what kind of events and situations you'll be put in when programming, how to start programming, what the subscription costs are, what are some of the, how to get started, literally it's kind of a manual from taking someone who's never programmed anything ever, and we're talking about module programming, of course, and getting them all the way to the point where they can successfully program the most common stuff and then be prepared to troubleshoot when it doesn't go as planned, which is a big deal. So yes, I will say my class is great for that. You just have to be aware that you can't take this class one time and then be ready to just tackle every programming event, because I stumble every single day still dealing with this. Between the 3 trucks we have on the road, we run into quite a few situations where we do have to go, this is not a normal programming event, there's some issue. And it's a whole different world when you start getting requests for used modules. There's lots of other aftermarket things that have to be done. So that world of reprogramming and reflashing vehicles is massive. It's a career all by itself, so it's not something you could jump into in one afternoon and be prepared for everything immediately. But if it's something you want to do, it's absolutely feasible to start in that. My class, I feel like, is the best in the industry for that. I don't think anyone else has put together a better class for starting out and then becoming and providing you with resources to get as good as you can get. So, I obviously think mine's the best because I wouldn't have wrote it if I didn't think it was going to be the best there was. But there's still a lot of learning to do even after doing my class and stuff. You have a lot of self-taught stuff. So yes, and it's a different method to learn online. It's much like this, where I basically teach a class. We interact whenever I teach classes live, which is starting to become more often now. I've got a couple classes that are coming up that are almost written to the point to where we can do them a lot more often. So, but all the materials archived, and you're welcome to see it. Little over 100 hours of training material on my website. So enough about my website. Yes, Dorsey T, I do have stuff for that on there that will get you started in reflashing, but it is not just an overnight thing. You can get right on it. It's a big part of your career. It'll change your whole career getting into module programming. All right, on to the next one. All right, this one is from Keith's Automotive, and it says, got a 2015 Altima 2.5. A used transmission was installed by another shop. It has the code P17F0 for CVT judder. That's a common CVT judder code. It says, doesn't mean the transmission is toast. How do you get rid of it? It won't clear even if the battery is disconnected. So, if a replacement CVT was installed on a 2015 Altima, the CD that would come with that transmission originally as a reman unit would need to be present, or if the numbers stamped on the top of the transmission are still there, or if the QR code is still on the range sensor. There's a TSB specifically for this. If you were to actually look up in whatever service information you have available, there's some instructions on taking those numbers that are stamped on the transmission or the information off that QR code that's on the range sensor if it's still legible. You could go to the Nissan-TechInfo website, and then you would input that information that's on the transmission and see if the file is available. If it is, you would download that file, and using console R to R with a J2534 device using the Cardac 3 or a Mongoose cable, or if you had a legitimate console, you could use that to install that file into the transmission control module. That would be the first step, and that usually gets rid of the judder code, even if it's a hard code. If reprogramming it with the correct calibration information for that transmission valve body assembly into the TCM does not fix the judder code, then unfortunately the service procedure is to replace the unit. But that code does come up if the information in the TCM is very different from that's in the valve body. And if you've simply just replaced the transmission but not programmed the TCM, then that will need to happen first before you can determine if the code's there because of an actual judder problem or because it's not programmed. All right, I appreciate your question, and on to the next one. So this next question is from Chad. This question is really good, and I'm gonna talk about this. I've kind of hinted at some of the stuff that's going on with this one and another one, so I'm really glad someone proposed this. It says, "Good evening, Mr. Perkins." And I don't know how I feel about Mr. Perkins, but good evening. First, I would like to thank you for your great training you provide. It has taken my abilities to a whole new level. Thank you very much, Chad. I appreciate that. That's why I do it. I would like to know what your opinion is for flashing FCA vehicles with YTech. It now requires 3 subscriptions to program. 1 subscription for Tech Authority, 1 for YTech, and another one for programming. Each time it costs $120 to flash FCA vehicle, and I remember GM doing something similar years ago. Do you think if enough people file an SIR with NASTF, this might change? So to get everyone else up to speed, an SIR is a Service Information Request form. NASTF is the National Automotive Service Task Force. Their website is nastf.org for National Automotive Service Task Force. And there you can kind of learn about them and what they do. They're a liaison for our industry to kind of get us in touch with the OE manufacturers. So what Chad's talking about is YTech has changed their subscription base to where you're going to program. Even if you have the factory micropod, you have to pay $50 for a YTech subscription to make the pod work. You have to pay $26.95 or $36.95 depending upon how many days you would like to have the short-term subscription. And again, that $50 to make the micropod work for 3 days. And then the $36.95 is to make the micropod connect to the Tech Authority subscription for 3 days, which allows you to communicate with anything 2018 or newer or perform any programming events. And then when you're going to go program a module, you also have to pay an additional $35. That's $50, $36.95, and $35 for a programming subscription token, which is locked to that one vehicle for 1 year. So you're going to have to pay I guess $86.95 for 3 days to allow your micropod to work, and then for each vehicle you program, you're going to pay $35. If you're programming a replacement module that's part of the theft system, so the body control, wireless control module, sometimes body control, or doing key functions, you also have to purchase a PIN number, which requires a vehicle security credential, which is about $400 in a couple months to get a hold of, and then you also have to have the information from the vehicle owner, like a copy of their driver's license, all that stuff, and then pay the $30 to get the PIN number. So it can quickly add up to $150 or more to simply program one vehicle with Chrysler. So I understand your frustration, and I did a video about this called Consumer Edition, Don't Ever Buy a Chrysler. And I talked at great lengths about how this is frustrating because in comparison to other manufacturers, that is 4 or 5 times the cost sometimes, which means we have to pass that cost on to the customer. So we do charge very high rates to program Chrysler vehicles because the cost has greatly increased. So the latter part of his question is, do you think, and if enough people file an SIR with NASTF, this might change? I've spoken to Donnie Cipher about this, and unfortunately, the cost of the programming subscription really isn't something that's dictated or dealt with or within the jurisdiction, for lack of better terms, of NASTF's powers as the organization that deals with that kind of situation. So unfortunately, no, it doesn't matter how many SIRs you file, they're not going to be able to do much for him. But Donnie has been in talks with them about how this is a major pain point for us in the aftermarket, and that maybe finding a way to bring that down. But what their response has been is that due to the cloud-based technology they're using and simply the manpower required to keep the system running, that is the cost in order to make any money or break even and not lose money on just supporting the flashing system for their dealers and for the aftermarket. We can all call BS all we want, but that's what they're saying, and it's kind of whatever they want to do. So unfortunately, no, filing an SR is not going to fix that. But if you can just get enough people to stop buying Chryslers, maybe they'll listen to us of why we're saying don't buy a Chrysler because their vehicles are not. And again, I went into this real big on my video called "Don't Ever Buy a Chrysler." You could check it out. I'll put a link in the description down below. I basically, if the manufacturer isn't going to support the aftermarket in properly fixing their vehicle, then the aftermarket is not going to support people purchasing that manufacturer's products. So a good example, that's Toyota. They provide everything to us, all the service information. They give us a ton of resources at a very reasonable cost to repair their vehicles. Because of that, their customers that buy Toyotas have a very good experience, even if they don't take their vehicle back to Toyota to have it repaired. So more people buy them. You'll notice as the years go along, I'm sure Chrysler's struggling with that because they are not providing that same quality of service. So Chad, thank you for your question. I apologize I couldn't have a brighter answer for you, but all right, so had a few questions, but with really long answers this time. Again, I really appreciate all the questions. I hope to see you guys next week with some more of more answers to your questions. Remember, you can submit them to TechQuestions at l1training.com. I appreciate all you guys being here. Remember, like, subscribe, comment, thumbs down if you didn't like it, thumbs up if you did. Either way, I appreciate your interaction. We'll see you guys next time.